So, welcome to what may be known as Orange Monday. Maybe it'll become Orange Tuesday. Who knows? Maybe it'll become Orange Wednesday for all of those who are old enough to remember what Orange Wednesdays used to mean. A day when we all used to go to the cinema. Very good adverts, by the way, and part of the reason why Orange for years dominated the mobile market scene because of that whole thing. I'm very surprised no one ever tried to replicate it or have attempted to try and bring it back. Although I know Compare the Market did with Meerkat Wednesdays, although I don't think it was as successful. But anyway, back on or from old marketing tactics and English adverts to this trade war that is currently, of course, going on. The FTSE 100 opened this morning at minus 400. The Asian markets, I think, opened at also around that as well, from what I remember off the top of my head. At the time, I don't think the American markets at the time of this doing this opened as well, but they're probably going to see a very similar reaction. And of course, at the time of doing this video, the FTSE 100 is what minus 375, I think, at the time of this doing this video. I have to remember at the top of my head, even though I just looked at it. So hardly a monumental bounce back, shall we say. But it is very, very obvious now these tariffs are going very, very much into effect. Some went into effect over this weekend. Some are going also into effect potentially this week as well. Not only that, we are still hearing rumors that there are more sectoral tariffs potentially incoming this week as well. Beef could certainly be one, especially expect maybe pharmaceuticals to be one as well coming down the line. Honestly, we just don't know what else could happen this week. But the markets, shall we say, are not good. And this is, of course, a trade war, of course, entirely initiated by Donald Trump. Now, last time, people tend to forget, this obviously happened very much to the end of Trump's last term, but Trump had to give one of the biggest bailouts in American history to US farmers because after he put tariffs on China, China went, okay, we're going to tariff all your soybeans in particular. I think that's what they sort of targeted, as well as a couple of other US agricultural products. And that hurt US farmers dramatically to the point where they had to be bailed out by Trump. Like, that's how bad it was last time. China's done the exact same, and they are retaliating even more this time. What do you think is going to happen to not only US farmers, but potentially other US industries and sectors as well? So, I want to cover what China has done because I think their response to this has been really strong, but it will do in return a lot of damage. And I am really fully expecting when the American stock market probably opens in a bit. Ooh. Yeah. Cliff edge, I think, doesn't even describe the plummet we've seen this morning and continuing since, of course, the announcement of those tariffs. But like I say, a lot of people still speculating that Trump is going to reverse on these. Who knows? Who knows what he will do this time? But yeah, this is, like I said before, fully unadulterated Trump. There are no more adults in the room to curb his negative pulses or his stupidity this time. They're all on board with it. But anyway, let's go on into this because I think this Chinese retaliation is going to be, I think, quite significant. You add this with more retaliation expected not only from us here in the UK, but also the EU responding potentially as well this week. We'll see. Like I say, it'll all add up. So before we do get on into this, like I say, please do click the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Of course, there are links that help out the channel as well. The Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on then into this. So China intends to crush the trade war. So China has hit back hard in now the mounting trade war with the US and announcing unexpected illegality measures against Donald Trump's tariffs. These now include an additional 34% tariff on all imports from America to match those listed by Trump on April 2nd for imports from China, as well as now other measures. China's response compromises three things. They first of all peak at Trump's unilateral bullying tariffs, calling to arms to other nations to fight back against Washington and put pressure on the US to go to the negotiating table to make a deal. The last thing, of course, the government in Beijing wants right now, given its fractious economy, is, of course, a full-blown trade war. And like I say, no one wants a full-blown trade war, but this definitely seems to be where it's heading. This really seems to be where it's heading, that's for sure. While at least this method of tactics of the US administration has been met with both disappointment and disdain, it is important not to forget that Trump is, after all, a complete reordering of the global trade system. His task may not be possible, or at least much more messier than, of course, envisaged, but leaving aside the revenues and leverage, Trump's tariff policy is designed to, of course, break the China-centric supply chains that have been created over the decades. This now includes circumnavigating China's practice of a transshipment, which is to say, the use of third countries to now ship Chinese goods to the US and other nationals, for example, to promote Chinese commercial footprint. The obscure, of course, the country's original origin, even branding, or even bypassing trade barriers and export controls. And bear in mind, that is a problem. That is like a serious problem we all face. Even here in the UK, this has been a continuing problem. This is something that, every country gets onto China about, but they keep on doing it. Now, I think what Donald Trump has done here is the wrong way to go about it. There is far, far better diplomatic ways and means to do it. But, Trump has just taken, a complete hammer to the glass sculpture that is our international trade. So anyway, on that note, amongst the other, of course, higher tariffs announced by Trump, other than, of course, China, were, of course, the Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Bangladesh, as well as India. Over the weekend, it was reported that Vietnam and Cambodia and India were currently in negotiations with the US to try and get lower tariffs in return for yet unknown concessions. These concessions will almost certainly include action, including possible tariffs against Chinese goods and investment. And like I say, Vietnam, Cambodia, very, very much dependent on exporting, very, very much dependent on exporting to the US. So it doesn't surprise me that they have gone into instant negotiations with the US. India is quite surprising as well. But if it's like, oh, you want us to, screw over China, India will go, sure, we're all about that. Why not? So we'll see what happens when these concessions happen and what those concessions take the form of. But we'll see on that. On, of course, the specifics of US-China trade, Trump administration has left little doubt about what is probably still open to negotiation at some point. It will probably be a fundamental poor trade relationship has now become even more tense. The average US tariff on all Chinese good imports, which were about 440 billion back in 2024, and now about 65%, comprising about 34% announced last week, about 10% now all increased in goods announced earlier this year, and of course the pre-existing 11%. Some goods carry much higher tariffs, of course, like EVs, which are now 100%. This should, of course, be noted that the US has also now an intricate system of controls and restrictions on certain exports, of course, to China, especially in advanced technology, named companies, and investment flows to and from the country. So, as you can see, they are going after China hard on this one. China's retaliation against these tariffs was, of course, very much stronger than expected. It takes, of course, an average Chinese tariff on US goods on imports were about 143 billion back in 2024 to about, of course, 50%. This now completes the 34% tit for tat, and of course, the pre-existing level, of course, at 15%. China's announcement was, of course, accompanied by a raft now of additional measures targeting some very specific American firms, launched anti-monopoly and competitive investigations into others, and imposed export controls on now several rare earths. So they have really hit back hard at this, and this will become a full-blown trade war. And this is why you are now seeing countries like China, Japan, South Korea come out and say, no, we aren't for this. Like, we aren't for this. And it is very, very rare to see these countries come together and have a go at the US. You are also seeing China really start to reach out to the EU as well here as well. So maybe you could see some, growth maybe there between those two potential countries. Well, I say, blocks, or between that country and the block at that point. Maybe you could see that. Honestly, it has also pretty much upended a lot of diplomacy and diplomatic, friendships certainly as well on this. So one side, of course, the nature of this relationship does mean that Chinese exports to the US are now subject to new tariffs, leave about 2.3% of China's GDP, while US exports to China are, of course, a mere 0.5% of America's GDP. The tariff, therefore, is now much greater hit for China. Even so, China's $20 trillion economy should be able to absorb it, especially if it takes actions to mitigate the effects on export firms and hundreds of thousands of jobs in the preliminary export-oriented coastal provinces. Beijing could, of course, for example, channel the tariff revenues connected now on its own export firms to include state enterprises, which will almost certainly allow them to re-embed, to decline, of course, the lower Chinese export prices, so to diffuse some, at least, the price rises caused by the US tariffs. It will almost certainly add to the monetary and fiscal policy, easing that is already now baked into 2025 economic outlook. We should, of course, then expect even further reductions, of course, in China's already low interest rates, where other monetary relaxations, among them borrowing by local governments, now addressing resistance to its beleaguered housing sector. Many economists hope that Beijing will use this trade war for a moment to now boost a stronger consumer demand within China. But the government's very much firm commitment to industrial policy and exports means that its political capacity to actually embrace any meaningful changes to income and wealth redistribution and to distribution of its economy and even political power is, of course, weak. China will almost certainly find it very much harder to defy the effects of the tariffs by exporting more and investing more into third countries, given, of course, many of them are now also subject to higher tariffs as well, or will agree deals with Trump that now favor the US rather than China. And then this is the interesting one as well. So we've got now the US pretty much trying to use these to break China, to get them to sign trade deals, which will screw over China. And then, of course, TikTok comes into here. Because apparently, one thing we've heard, that TikTok was almost ready to sell to an American company. Apparently, they were close. But because of these tariffs that have now come in, this entire TikTok deal has been blown up again. So who knows what will happen to TikTok at this point. There are now also other tensions in play, including the ban of TikTok in the US, unless it is, of course, sold to an American company. The sale of over 40 ports, including Panama, by Hong Kong's Kate Hutchinson to the US asset manager, BlackRock. There are also now bright spotlights of unmitigating gloom arising from commercial sectors and, of course, trade wars. That's something else you're seeing as well. All these ports being sold from Hong Kong companies to Panama, to now US companies. There's going to be a lot of economic pain, a lot of economic shifts that happen over here. The whole question, of course, Panama's future, and of course the Panama Canal. What's going to happen there? Who knows? But yeah, certainly something we might see happen there. But of course, Trump's still spouting his imperialist stuff that he wants, Canada, he wants Panama, and of course, Greenland in that as well. One, of course, possibility of the economic fallout might be, of course, the less draconian than, of course, the carnage implied by the recent plummeting financial markets. It won't go unnoticed that we have seen some at least marked declines in the US dollar, bond yields over the price of oil, which can at least be viewed as offsets to the tariffs, if not a stimulus. Other than that, it is more than likely that in the months to come, the US and China might want to, quote, deal under which they call off the trade dogs of war to agree to a temporarily exchange now of concessions. Whether we will see this holds the stronger cards, either the US consumer or the Chinese supplier. And that is really the state of this. I think that is it, really. Who holds all the cards? We'll find out, like I say, in a couple of weeks. Like I say, the tariffs really going into effect, of course, this weekend and this week. There's maybe expecting more stuff to come in this. Who knows what might happen? Like I say, I'm expecting maybe a beef or even a pharmaceutical thing to maybe come this week, maybe in the coming weeks. Who knows? Will Trump hold his nerve over keeping these tariffs in place? Who knows? Will he start handing out exemptions left, right, and center? Who knows? What will those concessions be that, for example, India, Vietnam, and Cambodia and Bangladesh are trying to sort of get, if they are sort of directly saying, okay, we'll favor the US over China? Again, what will that mean? In terms of that, will these, of course, hold if Donald Trump leaves office? It's all up in the air, quite frankly, and the markets again are not responding to this well. Cliff edge, like I say, probably a bit more even dramatic than that. You're talking pure bungee jump territory, some of these markets that they've opened with today. And it's not just us. I know we opened up, like I say, minus 400. The European markets opened up similarly. Asia markets, very well the same. And like I say, I think the US markets are due to open the next sort of hour or two. So expect probably, again, a big sell-off. And then, of course, you get to the case of, is this Orange Monday? Who knows? But yeah, I can tell you this now. I'm glad I don't work in that industrial sector, because oh boy, it's probably been a very hectic week for everyone in that sector indeed. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.